Welcome to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's Major League Baseball betting podcast. I'm Mike Calabrese, and with Sean out today, say it with me, everybody. It's a bullpen episode. I'm joined by Kyle Murray and Collin Whitchurch to break down the Tuesday slate in Major League Baseball. If you guys can give me a quick, let's say 3 innings each, I think we can stitch those together, get a good start out of the both of you. But let me get you warmed up with 2 questions right off the top. What song is playing as you run out of the bullpen, and what team or player has been your gambling darling so far here in 2025? Kyle, I'll start with you.
I think I would want to do something a little ironic, so I'd probably go with like a Taylor Swift song or something like that, something to get the crowd laughing as I walk in, a little bit of an icebreaker there. In terms of a
She's
darling
got
for
some
me,
bangers. You could be a
yeah.
flamethrower. You could also be an off-speed guy, depending on which Swift song you're picking.
Oh, absolutely. There's a deep catalog there for some good choices. In terms of a team that's been a darling for me, I think a team that I'm going to touch on a little later, this Tigers team, they've been quite good to me so far, especially in some player props. I've had some home run props early on in the year. The pitching props have been pretty good to me for the Tigers. So I think I'd side with the Detroit Tigers as my early season darling so far.
All right, we got a Swiftie on one side. Colin, what are you running out to from the pen?
I thought I was going to go a little contrarian here with my pick, but Kyle went even more contrarian here because generally, if you're talking about like a bullpen running in, you're thinking of like really hyped up, like Mariano Rivera Enter Sandman type stuff. But I was like, if I'm running out to the bullpen in a critical situation or from the bullpen in a critical situation, I want to calm my nerves. There's no calmer song to do that for me than Float On by Modest Mouse, all-time classic. So that's probably what I would go with. In terms of teams or players that have been really good to me, I'll again get into this a little bit later. Walk props, pitcher walk props have been very good to me. And I'll just shout out the entire Cleveland Guardians pitching staff here with how underwhelming their start to the season have been. We saw Gavin Williams last night. Tanner Bybee has struggled with his control. Ben Lively. The entire Cleveland Guardians pitching staff has been very, very kind to me so far in this first month of the season.
All right, with that, let's hop into your best bets here on the Tuesday slate. Kyle, I'm going to start with you. You like the Tigers, basically in a coin flip, plus 105 right now out in the market. Reese Olson has looked untouchable in back-to-back starts, and the Tigers lineup is really starting to gel. Fun fact, in terms of Tuesday's slate, the largest weight discrepancy between starting pitchers, Gusto is 72 pounds heavier than Olson. Outside of them not being in the same weight class in the ring, why do you like the Tigers here?
Yeah, that's a good pull on a key fact there. But you mentioned Reese Olson, like he's had 2 back-to-back starts in a row. Early on in the year, did struggle a little bit, had some rust to shake off. He was kind of the forgotten pitcher in this Tigers rotation. Obviously, it was Casey Mize having a very good start to the year, Jackson Joe being a highly touted prospect, and obviously Jack Flaherty and Tarek Skubal. But Reese Olson was very good last year. He's been good in his last 2 starts. I think he's finally settling in this season. And obviously, Tigers last night lost game 1 of this series, but they scored 5 runs. I don't think there's going to be many games where if the Tigers score 5 runs, they're not going to have, a very strong chance or be a heavy favorite to win games. I think that's how good this pitching rotation is, and not just the starters, also the bullpen. I think this team, the pitching is obviously their strength, but finally looking like we're getting some offensive production going. Riley Green last year was an all-star. This year, very slow start, but had 2 home runs last night, so hopefully he's seeing the ball better. Also, a home run on Saturday night, I believe it was, in that doubleheader against the Orioles. Carpenter hit a home run opposite field last night, so I do think that there's going to be some bats in this lineup that can get the job done against an inexperienced pitcher that is, now newfound heavier guy as well off the bat. Kerry Carpenter should be leading off tonight. They should be getting Zach McKinstry back in the lineup as well, which I think is actually surprising coming in the year. You probably would not be a key point there, but he's been very, very good this year. So McKinstry got the day off last night. I think he'll be back probably in the middle of the order, hitting 3 or 4 for this team. They'd like to put him in the middle of the lineup, but Green, Carpenter, and McKinstry, I think, can all do some damage. And obviously, have Spencer Torkelson, who's been having a strong year as well. So I think the Tigers have enough firepower to get this done. And again, I think they only probably need to score 4, 5, 6 runs on most nights to have a really good chance to win with how good that pitching is.
Colin, your first play here is a first 5 angle for the Padres. They're going off just slightly at plus money between plus 105 and plus 110. A fantastic pitching matchup here between Logan Webb and Nick Pivetta, both sub-2 ERAs. 4 Pivetta's last 6 starts have yielded 3 hits or less. His location has been elite, 3rd in the NL in location plus so far this season. But any concern with the Padres bats at this point? They've scored just 5 runs in the past 5 games. Can they shake this off and get things going in terms of their lineup?
Yeah, the Padres offense has obviously cooled down here a little bit after just a red hot start, but this is kind of just me selling on the kind of high water mark at this point for Logan Webb, who's obviously been fantastic. I'm a huge fan of his. I think he's going to have a really fine season. Don't know if it's necessarily going to be Cy Young caliber, but he's definitely one of the top, 10 or so starters in the National League. If you look at his season so far to date, he absolutely dominated the Angels. Bad offense. The Reds struggle against elite command, which Webb has. He also dominated the Astros, who have struggled offensively this year. Not a lot of people will just look at the schedule and be like, "Well, he beat the Astros. The Astros are amazing." Not so far this year, offensively at least. They've missed a lot of pieces. He also pitched well against the Brewers, in the box score, but not necessarily when you look at the start as a whole. He allowed 9 base runners. He walked 3, was really lucky to get out of that game with no runs. And the one really good elite offense he faced this year, the Yankees beat him up. He allowed 5 hits, walked 4, 3 runs allowed. As you mentioned, the Padres offense has cooled down a bit after its flaming hot start. But they saw him a lot last year. 4 matchups with them last year, and they hit Webb pretty well. And I'm high on Nick Pivetta. Both of these pitchers have gotten off to incredible starts. I think we're more likely, you'd be shocked to hear probably that we're more likely to see some regression early on here from Webb than from Pivetta. What's impressed me about Pivetta specifically has been his walk avoidance. Throughout his entire career, Pivetta's been able to miss bats. When he gets into trouble, it's because he's walking batters. The Giants are a very patient team, but the way Pivetta has been pounding the zone and inducing whiffs, I think, gives him an edge here. And with Webb also pounding the zone, the Padres offense can get back on track here against him. The Padres offense has been about league average just recently, but we see what the high end possibilities are from this offense. And the Giants offense, if they're not getting free passes, they're very below average. They're about average right now, but they have a really high walk rate. So if Pivetta can avoid the walks, I really like him. Specifically, first 5 innings I'm looking at here. Don't want to get into the bullpens. Don't want to get into the Padres bullpen or the Giants bullpen. They both have too many variables, too many unknowns. You see me, I'm way more into the first 5s and the full game money lines in general this year, and that's the case here. Padres first 5, I bet it at about plus 108, and I would probably do about plus 105 or better there.
We turn now to your favorite underdogs on Tuesday's card. Kyle, you like Arizona plus 125 in Queens against the Mets. David Peterson on the bump for the Mets. He's building on a really strong 2024, nearly a 3-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio, but you're ready to fade him here. And I'll put that aside for a second. What interests me in terms of this matchup, can we get a prop market on extra innings? Because 4 of the last 7 for the Snakes have gone to extras. Another note that I think is interesting, the Mets have just been cashing unders at one of the highest rates in all of baseball, but the wind is pushing out pretty significantly to left center. I know that Citi Field is still cavernous, but just something to consider in terms of the total. But talk me through why you like the Diamondbacks here at plus money.
Yeah, great shout there on the weather factor there with the wind blowing straight out. I do think that's going to be a big producer of power in this one, but I think the Diamondbacks have plenty of power production in their lineup regardless of wind. Obviously, you look at this team, they're 3rd in the MLB in terms of run production. I know the Mets are kind of all the rage right now, but I do think this Diamondbacks lineup, specifically against lefties, when you look at some of these sort of secondary players who I think are just much better against lefties, guys like Randall Grichuk, Gurriel. So I think obviously you have Eugenio Suarez who's coming off of his big night a couple nights ago, but these are all guys who I think are going to have tons of production against left-handed pitching. I know Peterson has been solid, and when you look at the flip side of this, we're going to look at Eduardo Rodriguez, who's been a very volatile pitcher. But when looking at an underdog play, I don't mind leaning into some volatility here because sure there's going to be starts here where Erod goes out there and gets lit up a bit, but he's also going to have plenty of opportunities to go out there and strike out 8, 9, 10 hitters as he's done a couple times already this year and have a lot of limited production. And so far this season, he's been very good. He's been limiting power against lefties, which compared to previous seasons in his career was actually a weakness for him. And he will have to worry about some of these right-handed bats, guys like obviously Pete Alonso and Vientos with big power in the middle of the lineup. But again, I do think Eduardo Rodriguez has enough swing and miss and whiff stuff to avoid some power here. So I do like the Diamondbacks to upset the Mets here.
Collin, I've been waiting all season long for a White Sox or Rockies money line play. We finally have it. You like them first 5. You like them for the game at home. I could list off all their shortcomings, of course. I mean, their worst in the bigs in terms of average, the power shortage, total bases, slugging. They're also dead last. But they just gave the A's hell. They lost 2 one-run games, and they crushed the Athletics 10-3 in Game 2. So how do you get there numbers-wise with Freddie Peralta on the bump?
First of all, just for those curious, extra innings on Mets Diamondbacks, you can bet at about plus 700 at DraftKings. So there you
we
go.
go. Thank you.
I think that's probably
Fire that one
terrible
up.
value, but if you want to play into the trend there, you can bet no at minus 1,200. So maybe that's the play.
On that one.
Yeah. I'm actually shocked to hear you say that we haven't had a White Sox or Rockies money line play here with Sean Zerillo on this show most of the time, because this is absolutely disgusting. Most of my projected value today is absolutely disgusting. I feel like I'm channeling my inner Zerillo here with just betting on these absolute dog shit teams that I show value on. And one of them just happens to be my favorite baseball team, the Chicago White Sox. I came on our AL Central pod before the season. I talked about why I like their win total over. I just feel like an asshole every single time I have to talk about this stupid team. But here we are, and I'm projecting value on them against the Brewers tonight and Freddie Peralta. Just absolutely disgusting bet. We could very easily see a scenario where Freddie Peralta comes out, strikes out like 17 batters, and we call it a day. But I'm showing value here on both halves. White Sox plus 200 for the full game, plus 180 for the first 5. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that the White Sox have a good offense. They don't. Mike, you just listed off most of the reasons why they don't have a good offense. One of the things that they do, one of the ways that Chris Getz has built this team is hitters that know the strike zone and can draw a walk. What they do with the ball when it gets in the strike zone is another question, but when it's outside of the strike zone, they have a pretty good eye. They're a pretty patient team. Freddie Peralta obviously has elite strikeout stuff, but he's not missing as many bats this year as he has in the past, and he struggles with bouts of wildness he has throughout his entire career. So I think that plays into the White Sox benefit today. The Brewers offense has been pretty good this year. I think it's probably played above its projections. I think we could see some regression here. And they're facing an old friend today. Bryce Wilson is likely to get most of the work here. For the White Sox, he spent the last 2 years as a swingman-type pitcher in the Milwaukee bullpen. I'm not going to put a lot of stock into Wilson's matchup with the Brewers because I don't think he's probably going to go more than about 3 innings. Will Venable has actually done a pretty good job of mixing and matching, despite having an array of average or worse arms to choose from out of the bullpen. If he chooses the right ones tonight, I think the White Sox can get through the Brewers offense, which, you know, has some strengths, but obviously a lot of downside there as well. And Peralta, again, very helter-skelter pitcher. I think that if he's working on the fringes of the strike zone, if he's trying to induce whiffs, the White Sox are not going to take that. So again, plus 200, we're talking plus 180 first 5. There's value on the White Sox here. It's gross. I may as well be lighting my money on fire, but we're going to give it a shot here just because, again, there's value in the number.
Before we get to the rest of Kyle and Collin's card, a reminder that Grant Neiffer is going to be stepping into the batter's box at the end of this episode, giving out more home run props after some of his long shot dingers hit on the Monday episode. So stay tuned for that. Holy moly, do we have player props in today's episode? From home runs and total bases to strikes and walks, Kyle and Collin have a week's worth of props somehow jam-packed into one slate here on Tuesday. But before we get into those, you have a couple more just game plays here, Collin. Let's start with the Orioles. You like first 5 and game. We talked in the last episode about how intensely the O's have been underwhelming in terms of the season coming out of the gates really slow. But there's a mystery element here in Game 2 against the Yankees, and it's Kyle Gibson making his 2025 debut. The journeyman has been at the back of a rotation really in the past 2 years. What do you like about him in terms of his stuff, and does that really factor in, or do you see the bats waking up for the O's?
Yeah, this is less a bet on Kyle Gibson, if we're being honest, who you'll hear me mention in my walk props here in a little bit, and more just a bet on the Baltimore offense kind of positively regressing against Carlos Rodon and the Yankees pitching staff. I think the books have kind of overinflated the numbers on these splits against left-handed pitching. You know, obviously we see the numbers stabilize a little bit more and more as the year goes on, but if you look at the amount of plate appearances that some teams are seeing against left-handed pitching compared to right-handed pitching, it's obviously like 3-1 in favor of right-handed pitching. The Orioles offense has been really bad against lefties this year, so it makes sense that Rodon and the Yankees are heavily favored here. but it's kind of just a numbers play here. The Orioles full game plus 125 or better, first five plus 115 or better. I think, the uncertainty with Kyle Gibson aside, I think we can see some positive regression here from the Orioles offense. And it's just a numbers play more than anything. I think there's some value here on the Orioles.
All right, double whammy, first five and full game on the Orioles. Doing the same with the Buccos here. Move over, Paul Skeens. We got to start hyping up Andrew Heaney. His last two starts, 13 and a third, 0 earned, 13 Ks, 8 total base runners. Where did this come from out of the 33-year-old?
Yeah, again, this is another situation. It's almost identical to the Yankees analysis, so I won't dig too deeply into it because I'm fading Heaney a little bit in the props market. But again, the Pirates are facing a lefty in Shota Imanaga. Shota Imanaga has been fantastic this year, just like Carlos Rodon has been really solid this year at times. And the Pirates offense has been bad against lefties, but the Pirates offense has barely faced any lefties, and they have a ton of upside with the likes of O'Neal Cruz, who's absolutely breaking out like everyone expected him to. So I have the Pirates full game plus 127 or better, first five plus 120 or better. I think by the time we recorded this, the first five moved out of range. So again, plus 120 or better is where I would take that. But then the full game is still there. And I actually like the full game a lot better than the first five anyway, because you have the uncertainty of the Cubs bullpen, which has been a train wreck this year. The Cubs have been one of the best teams in baseball, arguably, but their bullpen is still a huge question mark. We're sitting here. I'm betting on some big underdogs, the White Sox, the Pirates, the Orioles. These are, again, all just value plays. But I like Pittsburgh tonight against a lefty, despite the fact that I'm going to be fading Heaney here in a little bit.
Let's close out with one more value play, Marlins money line, because we already went White Sox, so why not throw the fish on the menu as well? Sandy getting the start here. He's far removed from being Cy Young Sandy, but are you banking on him having his best outing of 2025 against this Dodgers lineup?
Yeah, this is arguably the grossest play, right? I just bet the White Sox against the Brewers, and now I'm betting the Marlins here against the Dodgers. I bet them plus 220 last night. Dodgers went up 5-0 early. I totally gave up. Marlins ended up taking it to extras before breaking my heart late, as expected. I do like Sandy in this matchup against the Dodgers, and the Dodgers, pitching plan here is very questionable. Not really sure at this time. I don't know if they've announced who they're starting tonight, but the Marlins offense has been frisky. I talked about this last time I was on the episode. Mervis, Xavier Edwards at the top of the lineup has been an absolute menace. He's been very pesky. I think he's probably in line to be Miami's all-star rep this year, despite the fact that Miami doesn't have a lot of all-star caliber players. That they haven't been as bad this year. They're not on the caliber of bad as, say, the Rockies or the White Sox. So I like the value here. Plus 180, I believe I have it at. Yeah, plus 170 or better on the Marlins here. Full game money line only. Again, I think Sandy has a solid matchup here, and Miami's offense is frisky. We saw it last night against the more questionable parts of the LA bullpen, and tonight probably getting a bullpen game or something. Don't know what. It's crazy that we enter every season with the Dodgers and we're like, they're so loaded, and it's April 29th, and it's like, who the hell's starting for them tonight? We don't know because everyone's hurt. I feel like that happens every year. But yeah, go fish tonight.
All right, I hyped it up, Kyle. You have, looks like 9 props here for Tuesday's slate. Let's just speed run through them. Let's start with Bryce Harper.
Yeah, a lot of mine kind of bunch up because I like to target a certain pitcher, and then I kind of bully him a little bit in the prop market. But yeah, Bryce Harper, a guy who I've continued to bet on against lefties. When you're looking at the last couple of years, you see his expected numbers just looking a lot better than his actual numbers. So he's gonna be a guy who continues to look good for me against lefties. Mackenzie Gore is a guy who has a ton of strikeout upside, but also gives up a lot of power. So far this season against lefties, 57% hard contact rate, 205 ISO allowed, and a 320 WOBA. So again, Bryce Harper, not really a guy who's all that negatively affected by the lefty on lefty split. So he's going to be a guy who I'm typically going to be targeting in that split. So, and also a good weather game here as well with the wind blowing out in Philly tonight.
All right, what's next? It looks like you got another total base or home run prop. Where are you going to go?
Yeah, so like I said, targeting a couple of pitchers on the slate. Looking at these Guardians, Chris Paddock is going to be a guy that I'm targeting. So I like Jose Ramirez and Kyle Manzardo. Looking at Kyle Manzardo's over 1.5 hits, runs, and RBIs at minus 110. And then Jose Ramirez over 1.5 total bases, plus 105 over there. Again, Paddock's been a guy that's struggling. He's really a fastball dominant pitcher. Typically not a guy that I think is going to have a ton of success with guys who have to rely on their fastball usage, and that usage is also up about 6 or 7% as well right now. Low strikeout guy, high hard contact guy. So I think Paddock's going to find himself in some trouble against the Guardians tonight.
We just talked about potentially fading Logan Webb in terms of his performance here. At least Collin is banking on that. Where do you come down on his strikeout total that's sitting at 5.5?
Yeah, Webb's been great. And you look at his strikeout rate, and so far this season, he's cleared this number, 6+ Ks in 4 of his last 5. But very difficult matchup here against a not strikeout friendly Padres team. Looking at a total strikeout percentage of 16.5 so far when you look at the start of last season against right-handed pitching. So matchup is not ideal against Logan Webb. And coming into the season, we know he's a guy who can go deep into games, but not necessarily the highest strikeout rate type player. So I think there's some regression there, like Collin alluded to earlier, in terms of his strikeout rate as well. So I like the fade here on the strikeout rate, the strikeout prop at 5.5.
We got 2 from the Mariners game. You like over 4.5 on their runs at a little bit better than even money. And then Cal Raleigh to get on base for total bases over 1.5, also just about at even money.
Yep, Mariners over 4.5, Cal Raleigh over 1.5 total bases. Also like Luke Raley over 1.5 hits, runs, and RBIs. And I like both of their home run props as well. Raleigh's at plus 310. Raley's at plus 525 over at MGM. So again, just picking on one specific pitcher here. When you look at the rates sort of allowed against lefties specifically, 245 ISO allowed, 383 WOBA allowed so far this season, and a 58% hard contact to lefties. Both also have pretty good pitch profile matchups here. Luke Raley's been awesome so far this season, 233 ISO, 365 WOBA since the start of last year. So definitely like him in this spot. I think there's plenty of value at plus 525 and getting him at right about even money for 1.5 hits, runs, and RBIs. Love that prop tonight.
Collin, you've more or less been the walk wizard for this entire season. Your record on walk props, 53-31, cashing out at a 63% clip. You have, looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them here. Walk me through the overs, the unders. How much? Oh, actually, I want to ask one caveat to get this started. How much of this is umpire dependent? Sean talks about it a ton in terms of when we record on the mornings before we give out the picks. Not every single umpire is set, and that obviously impacts, particularly when he's thinking about totals. But I have to imagine that this is everything in the walks market.
In the walks market, it should be. I'm still tinkering with this this model a little bit. This is something I just picked up on this year, primarily just looking at obviously looking to fade or back pitchers with strong career numbers and indicators based on what they've done so far. I'll give you one example, Andrew Heaney, who we just talked about. That'll be my first play I give up. Andrew Heaney's not walking anyone this year. Andrew Heaney generally is a pretty wild pitcher. Maybe Andrew Heaney has tweaked some stuff, but I'm going to go to the career norms, especially this early in the season. And the books have adjusted down to the point where they are not expecting him to walk as many. So that's where I now look to pounce on him. In terms of umpires, that's something that I'm going to look to introduce into the model as we get deeper into the season. Again, we don't know who all the home plate umpires are generally at the time of recording, so I'm going without them. But that's something that I'm going to continue to implement into how I bet these. But right now we're having quite a bit of success. It's a very basic breakdown. I wish I could say I had some insane data points like Sean Kerner breaking down strikeouts, but no, this is real bare bones stuff. We've had some success with it over a decent haul now here in the first month, so we're going to keep going into it. And again, I have 5 today, like you mentioned. I'll zoom through them real quick. Chris Paddock, Kyle mentioned as fading in the props market. I am betting the over on Chris Paddock's walks. Over 1.5 at minus 115. He's an auto bet at this number right now. I bet his over last start against the White Sox. Cashed that easily. Now he's facing a Cleveland team with very similar walk rates on the season as the White Sox. Kyle Gibson, I mentioned earlier in the Orioles analysis. One of the things I always look for in the walks market are pitchers who are debuting or returning from injury. This is Kyle Gibson's first start on the season. I was really hoping we'd get an over 1.5 here at decent price. The books are listing him at 2.5, which is unfortunate, but we get the 2.5 at plus money. So I'm taking the over 2.5 here at plus 105. Heaney, I mentioned, again, minus 110 on the over 1.5. The Cubs are a very, very patient team. That's one of the keys to their success offensively. especially at the top with guys like Nico Horner, with Kyle Tucker. They draw a lot of walks. I think Heaney could see a little bit of bouts of wildness today against them. And then the next pitcher I'm fading is a really good one, Garrett Crochet. He's already faced Toronto once this season. He walked several batters. His over 1.5 is just minus 130. Toronto, their offense is significantly better against lefties than it is righties. Instead of worrying about the game and Toronto's bullpen, I'm just going to bet that Crochet walks a few guys. Two walks isn't that much. It doesn't even necessarily mean you have a bad start. So I like the over 1.5 on Crochet. And finally, another pitcher that Kyle is betting on, David Peterson. Again, this doesn't necessarily mean I think Peterson's going to pitch poorly. I don't think this means the Mets are going to lose, but he's facing a Diamondbacks offense that is among the most patient in baseball. Guys like Corbin Carroll at the top. And Peterson has generally avoided walks so far this year, so this is, again, kind of fading the trend, looking at him go back to his career norms, because I think the books have over-adjusted based on his early success. I will say, again, you mentioned my record there at the top. Sunday, I gave out 5 picks. If you follow me in the Action app, they went 5-0. If you parlayed them, very nice payout. Today, if you parlay these 5, we get lucky again. It pays out around plus 2,200. Look at Bet365, DraftKings, Caesars for these walk props primarily.
Special thanks to Kyle and Collin for running in from the bullpen, I should say. Grant Neiffer now stepping into the batter's box, giving out more dingers here on the Tuesday slate, trying to keep the positive momentum after a few cashed going over the fence on Monday.
Thanks, guys. We got Dinger Tuesday. That means a 50% profit boost over on FanDuel. Don't forget to use it. And I got a parlay for you with 3 dingers. Let's just get right into it. Trent Grisham to hit a home run, plus 600 over at FanDuel. Now, Grisham has been fantastic to start the season. 7 home runs already, and he's in a great spot today. I have no idea what the pricing is on the Yankees game again today. It's just all over the board. Everything pretty much has value all the way up and down. I've taken 6 home runs in this game, and Grisham is one of my favorite ones. Gibson has been a plus matchup for lefty power over the last few years. The ballpark is good for lefty power. Temps in the 80s, wind blowing out at 12 miles per hour. The ball's going to be flying here. Grisham should not be at plus 600 here. I have his true odds closer to plus 400. This is a fantastic bet. Next up, Ryan Mountcastle. Now, he has not been great to start the season, but we're getting plus 630 odds. Rodon has been terrible since coming over to the Yankees. Been an absolute gas can for righty power. He's been up and down so far this season, but still gives up a lot of power. Mountcastle's underlying numbers, barrel rate, hard contact rate, have been some of the best of his career. So we know that the ball's going to start leaving the ballpark here soon with him. We know he's due for some positive regression. Plus 630 in a plus matchup with good weather is just a silly line. And last up, we're going with Austin Riley. Riley, we know how good of a power hitter he is. He's been great for years and years and years, been right around 40 home runs every single year. Gets a matchup versus Marquez, and Marquez, not the same pitcher he used to be since his comeback from injury. Not a great pitcher overall. They're playing over in Coors. The temps are a little bit colder, sitting around 57 degrees during game time, but wind is blowing out about 6 miles per hour. Overall, good ballpark. Odds a little bit too low for Riley here. You parlay all 3 of these together with the boost, you get 300-1 odds. I love it today, but I love almost anyone in that Yankees or Baltimore side of that game. It's fantastic, but Braves also in a great spot. 300-1. If you want, go take it with that boost. I'm out of here. Like it.
Thank you, Grant. Appreciate it. That'll do it for today's episode of Payoff Pitch. Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to tail some of the bets that you heard from Grant, from Collin, from Kyle, go ahead and look in the episode description for the quick slip links. It'll be able to populate in your sports book of choice instantly. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app and leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to the show. Also, check out the Action Network Discord to cut it up with Action Network experts in the Major League Baseball betting space, as well as to commiserate with those, comrades who are betting baseball every single day of the week. And then finally, a reminder that we're going to be back on Friday. It's going to be a special episode with Collin and Jim Turvey, focusing just primarily on futures in that episode, helping you build that portfolio as the season unfolds. For Collin Whitchurch, Grant Neiffer, and Kyle Murray, I'm Mike Calabrese. Thanks so much for listening to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's Major League Baseball betting podcast, and good luck with all your bets.